Hi all, let's look at another very interesting game from the St. Louis tournaments. The world chess champion Magnus Carlsen playing white against Sergey Karjakin, who has of course challenged him for the world championship in the past. Let's see this mega clash. c4 for Magnus, the English opening. e6, knight c3, bishop b4. g3 is played. Knight f6, bishop g2, black castles, knight f3, d5. Now we have a3, really prompting black to double white's pawns. Black refuses to do this though and just keeps the bishop. So Sergey Karjakin maintains his bishop. If he did take on c3, this is plausible actually. For example here, this looks like an even position. Yeah, it's plausible. The bishop might be dangerous later, however, but it should be dynamically equal. So anyway, bishop e7, d4, d takes, knight e5. This is an interesting line now. Knight c6. You might think this is a bit odd. What happens here? Magnus gives up his fianchetto bishop. But this method has been employed a lot at the top levels. It looks as though when you fianchetto the bishop, you're creating weaknesses, and to give up that bishop, you need to know what you're doing if you're going to do this. Don't try this at home. Knight takes c6, queen e8, knight takes, queen takes. What has white gained? Well, there's structural fragmentation of black's pawn structure. Queen a4, and the intriguing thing here is that the usual idea is at least to get the c4 pawn. This is the most usual trodden path here. Just to take on c4, for example, c takes, queen takes, e5, queen h4, and it's supposed to be dynamically balanced here, because indeed there are light square weaknesses for the bishop, which hasn't got a counterpart to try and make use of later. However, Magnus throws in a kind of novelty move, d takes c5, so equal on pawns. So really, you really need to know what you're doing if you're giving up the bishop and you're not even getting a pawn here. So what is the intention here? Bishop e3, queen c7, rook d1, knight d5 is played, intriguingly. Okay, so bishop d4, rook d8, knight takes d5, which forces black to play e takes, because if rook takes, then the queen is actually checkmating. That would be embarrassing. So e takes, and it looks as though this is really an interesting imbalance. Different coloured bishops, nice blockade square on d4. And as it turns out here, it transpires now that white seems to have a very comfortable position, despite the light square weaknesses, as long as white's not getting mated on the light squares anytime soon. This looks as though this is a nice blockade on the d4 square. We have rook d4, queen g5, queen d2, just offering the exchange of queens. And that's actually taken. So should it be a draw here? It looks maybe a little bit drawish, although white does look comfortable to me in many respects. f3, giving the king f2 access potentially when it's now used. And we have the move f6 here. Rook d4, king h7, rook 1 to d2. Okay, so now e2 is protected adequately. h3, a6, rook f4, probing. Bishop d4, king h7, bishop c3. King g8. g4, hg, king h7, rook f5. Now, does this really have the intention of sacking the exchange or not? Now, if Sergey wanted to not take any theoretical risk, it seems rook d7, you'd think it does that job. For example, e4, rook e d8, this position, it seems there's nothing to write home about for either player, surely, with opposite coloured bishops. But Sergey plays rook b7, tantalizing white to sacrifice the exchange, which actually Magnus does. He does actually play this. Now, usually, if you can win at least the pawn, and then 2 pawns later, you might be doing quite well. Is there an upward trend here? Bishop takes, rook takes. So at the moment, it's just for one single pawn, this exchange sack. The bishop is really quite good on c3, of course, and as long as the rooks don't have loads of open ranks and files. Now, this was intriguing actually just here, that again, if black wants to hold on to not lose the c4 pawn, instead of king g6, rook c7, for example, it seems that it should be an even position. So I think Sergey's shaking things up. He's allowing the c4 pawn to drop off. Yeah, intriguingly. I mean, there's also, as well as rook c7, there might be, there's other methods. Rook c8. Okay, the rooks look a bit passive, but if black wants to draw, it seems to be there. Even if white moves some pawns forward, so what? It should be only a small edge for white. But the way this is played, it's interesting. Just giving up c4. This is approaching move 40, though. Maybe it's a bit of a risk. Rook h8. Now, the c4 pawn is immune here because of this check, because e2 will be a problem. Well, if king e3, there's rook e7 check. I guess it can be considered to play king e1, but yeah, maybe something like this, and then if it's a bit dangerous for the white king to be on the first rank. So, okay, but Magnus stops all this anyway, just king g3 to stop any rook h2. So he's going to get his pawn now, an extra pawn. So 2 pawns for the exchange. And ordinarily, usually, I would favour being the exchange down for 2 pawns myself. We've seen a number of games on this channel where it's usually the side that wins, actually, that does the exchange sack. And it does seem as though this might be tricky for black to play. Let's see now. So rook h1, we have rook c7. Yeah, some manoeuvring here in this position. Now this pawn goes to a dark square protected by the bishop, so that's going to be pretty safe pretty soon. So it's a bit of a fortress. Is it enough to actually win from here, though? Black's rooks do seem fairly tied down or without too many open files. That bishop on c3 is a guardian of white's position. Check. Now here, it's also a checkmater in this variation. Bishop d2 checkmate. So keeps the king at bay. And yeah, what is actually the plan here? Well, we have here now this bishop centralizing there. b4, putting pawns on dark squares, protected by the bishop here. And it looks a bit fortressy. Is it just going to be a draw? All the other games were drawn in the round. Is this just going to be another draw? So some excitement with g5. That's actually taken, because otherwise, yeah, there's going to be no king infiltrations or anything. Potentially. g5 was played. Now here, king takes g6 was played. If f takes, this should be actually an even position. No, this position here, pardon me, this position here is actually an advantage for white. So let's have a look at that again. Here, if f takes g5, it seems as though white gains the advantage. This is a dangerous pawn, this is a dangerous pawn. And if white can avoid losing any pawns, this is really actually quite good. This position here. Okay, but, yeah, Sergey eliminated that potential danger. G takes, king takes, and it should be around, it should be level still, dynamically level, but Sergey's getting short on time, even though there's a like increment per move of 25 seconds, was it 30 seconds, one of the two. Sergey's in time pressure here, and it's around here that Magnus is also getting to be less than a minute on his clock as well. He needs to try and provoke black to play a mistake. So at move 76, Magnus plays e5, and we have rook f1, which is a standard practice of many rook and pawn ends just to keep the checks going if to keep the opponent not being too adventurous. And here it looks like the check should be in principle played. Now possibly Sergey, possibly very short on time, felt that the check was a little bit risky for king d5, because then there's rook h7 check, right? But if we look at this position here, let's just have a look. This didn't happen in the game. If bishop d4 here, for example, black has not this, because then check, and this is nasty for a6, and you can see that the king's in a fantastic place. But actually, with an accurate move like rook d8, this should be okay, because that bishop's a liability. If the king has to move, then we carry on the checks like that. Yeah, any e6, then check, and the bishop gets lost. So this should be enough for a draw, basically. This whole rook e1 check. Not worried too much about king d5 with rook h7. But, yeah, it seems as though, if we look at another possibility, king f4, this is also plausible. As long as this pawn's not got mobility, this position should be even. So interestingly, yeah, rook e1 check is enough to draw, but here in this crunch moment we have king c6, and this really changes the picture of the position. Suddenly white has a big technical advantage here with this check. And king b5 was played. If we look at king b7, which seems not very productive for the king to be passive, this just is looking like a big advantage for white, holding e5 and two connected passed pawns over here. So this is looking very bad. King b5, and now this is very different, this position actually, because now check is possible, and now e6, this dangerous pawn. This is a really dangerous pawn now. We have check, and it looks as though, well, can't black just keep up the checks? Now here, if black tries to get the opposition, that king could be kicked back, and white can get the pawn there, for example. So black plays this check, and you might think, well, hold on, is this winning? Because hasn't black just got a load of checks? Check, check, and this is a really delicate moment for white to fluff up or not at move 84. How does white actually stop these checks? Now Magnus played the best move in the position, king g7, it seems. If he plays king g6, then actually rook g8 check, and there's almost like a mating possibilities. And in fact, rook g5 here threatens to checkmate with rook h1. But e7 looks as though that's resourceful for rook h6. But if we get this position, in fact, black can draw this with rook takes c5, for example, check. Take this as a drawn position now, theoretically drawn position. It's going to be just a drawn position. So Magnus has to be playing the accurate move here, even though it might be in some way tempting for a moment to play king g6. But actually king g7, this rook is cut out of g1, and that rook is cut out of g8. Simple, but actually this kind of position, yeah, it's important for everyone who plays over the board chess to understand these kind of positions, which occur in practical play. Which can occur if you sacrifice the exchange. So rook a8 is played, but now progress is being made. e7. So this looks like it's really dangerous now. King f7, rook e4, and now rook d6 with the possibility of rook d8. We have here rook h8, but now rook takes a6, getting the two connected passed pawns. Yeah, this is where the game ended. If the game carried on from here, well, white's just going to push the a pawn eventually. check. This is a fictional continuation where, okay, that can just be saying, what does black do here? Say rook h7, then rook f6, getting out of the way of the a pawn, among other things, is going to be winning here after rook f8, guiding the a pawn to queening. So let's go back to the final position. Yeah, so daring exchange sacrifice, which if black wanted to could have been just for one pawn, but it seems Sergey was mixing things up, made it 2 pawns, but actually the position did have this little trick in time pressure to use, which Sergey blundered catastrophically in his time pressure. Yeah, in time pressure creates blunders. So we have a decisive game. And if it wasn't decisive, probably not many YouTube channels would cover this game. So we can all be grateful for the blunders, even at this time limit, for this game being featured. Yeah, it wasn't like... I think gone are the days of these Kasparov crushes at the opening, where Kasparov had a massive advantage at the opening. Magnus Carlsen's got a very different style to, for example, Kasparov. And it's a bit of a grinding style. And White was playing with very little risk, though, with the exchange set. There was very little risk of actually losing that. So the risk was of black to slip up, and that is what happened, really. Okay, I hope you got something from it. Comments, questions, likes, shares, appreciated. Thanks so much.